Hello and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Providence. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Jacob Van Lunen. We're ready to go early in the morning here on day 2. We've got round 10 action. 2 of our 4 undefeated players facing off against each other. Andrew Cuneo with white-blue control playing against Seth Manfield on green-black Delirium. Both players with that coveted perfect record overnight, really setting them up for a nice run today to the top 8.
Yeah, Seth Manfield, former world champion, chose to play green-black Delirium this weekend after playing a Teamer Aetherworks Marvel deck last weekend. And he felt like the Aetherworks Marvel deck was really poorly positioned and that it wouldn't show up that much this weekend. So he decided to play the best matchup for the Marvel deck, which is this green-black Delirium deck, because he felt like it had a good matchup against basically the rest of the field.
Okay. Yeah, we've seen a real decline in popularity of the Aetherworks Marvel deck. It is gone.
Yeah, there's none of it
playing here,
especially at the top tables.
Right.
Andrew Cuneo, on the other hand, he's playing a very different version of the blue-white deck than what we've been used to seeing. It's a more traditional build of the blue-white control deck that he kind of always plays and that he played, I believe, at the Pro Tour. But instead of playing Fumigate, he just cut those for Archangel Avacyn's.
Saw him do a lot of work with Archangel Avacyn yesterday.
Yeah.
In fact, he took one opponent from 20-0 with Archangel Avacyn.
Yeah, 4 times 5.
Boom, 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 boom. Okay, and here's another key interaction that Andrew has in the deck. He has access to Spell Queller, really one of the big pulls for a deck like this, and you can see why. He just used it to not only create a threat that he can now protect, but he countered a Kalatas with it, which is a real issue for his deck if it survives. So great stuff here from Andrew in the early stages. And what you'll notice when you watch Andrew play with this white-blue control deck is that he effectively never plays a spell on his own turn unless forced to. He's basically operating entirely in the sphere of his opponent's turn. And he will simply sit here with what ultimately ends up being a lot of counter spells. He's playing 3 Negate, 4 Spell Queller, and 4 Void Shatter in the main deck here. And he will often sit back on those and just sit here and basically protect his threats. Again, that's the highlight, too, in Archangel Avacyn, is that he can play it on his opponent's turn. Sometimes he even gets to block and eat a creature or whatever. But even more importantly, if he gets to untap with a threat or 2 on the battlefield, 1 Spell Queller plus 1 other anything, basically, he can just start using his counter spells to maintain his own advantage on the board, and that's all he really needs to do. It doesn't play like a traditional control deck where he's trying to push things into the extreme late game. You know, we've seen that quite a bit from Andrew over the years and other players, but this deck doesn't play like that. It plays a little bit more. It's similar to the white-blue deck. Oh, here we go. Here's a Grasp of Darkness from Seth.
Yeah, once it turns the corner, it closes quickly.
That's right, and that's not what we normally see from Andrew. Normally we see that slow constriction of card advantage and counter spells and inevitability, but here it's not like that. And it makes, to me, I like this a lot better. It just makes this deck way more fun to watch. Well, that actually worked. So Seth fires off on end step there, Grasp of Darkness on the Spell Queller, which was holding that Kalatas hostage, and he's free.
Yeah, now it's interesting because Seth's graveyard had a lot of different card types there.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew knows that Seth has an untapped land in hand because of the Grapple with the Past turn before. Then, in addition to that, Seth, by using that on Andrew's end step, is forcing Andrew to tap mana during his main phase, or during his turn, which will give Seth an opportunity because Andrew only has 3 blue mana, to untap and maybe play something huge like an Emrakul the Promised End or something. So they don't know each other's deck lists. Anything could happen. That gave Andrew an opportunity to get behind, and Andrew decided to let it resolve here, though. I mean, he had the removal spell anyway. Yeah,
and this actually works out really beautifully for Cuneo because he's able to leave up the ominous 3 mana, which represents either a Void Shatter or another Spell Queller, or, of course, a Negate is a possibility as well. But he also, Seth attacked. Seth decided to send Kalatas into the red zone there, which really plays into Cuneo's game plan of using cards like Blessed Alliance an Immolating Glare, of which he has a total of 6 of those cards in different configurations in his list here. And those require that card like Kalatas gets in the red zone while Andrews has untapped mana. So Andrew's pretty happy to be able to just Immolating Glare. I mean, that I can't imagine a better scenario if I'm sitting in Andrew's seat than getting to take out Kalatas for just 2 mana, leave up counter mana on top of it. And no zombies, no life, like nothing. It was just a straight up 1-for-1 at that point. Now this is a important development for this game though as well. Traversi Ulvenwald just found a copy of Emrakul, and that is going to come down in a turn or two here. I mean, he already had 6 types going in to that turn. Could be the turn right now. Let's see. He's got Planeswalker, Instant, Creature, Artifact, Sorcery. So that's 5. So that would put him at 11 towards the 13. There's 12, unless we're missing 1 card type in there, which we must be. So there you go. Instant, Sorcery, Creature, Planeswalker, Artifact. No, it's not enough. So our count was actually right.
Yeah. I was a bit confused there also.
Yeah, Seth's got to be careful with that. Thankfully, Andrew was all over it. He's like, wait a second, that's not enough.
A lot of time when you've cast cards like Grapple and, you have cards like Evolving Wilds in your deck, you kind of just automatically assume land in your head, which you shouldn't do.
It is interesting, though, to look at Andrew Cuneo's build here, and, it makes me curious about just how much work an Emrakul, the Promised End, can do against him. Like, he rarely has much of a board state. You saw before he cast that Archangel Avacyn, he had nothing. Okay, now there's Emrakul, which I'm assuming is going to get Void Shattered here, but still, you'll get the trigger from Emrakul being cast. Well, this is an anticipated response from Cuneo. That could be a sign of weakness. It could be him just being mana efficient. Let's see what he comes up with here. Does he have a counter? Because the other thing that's interesting is... All right, looks like he does have a Void Shatter. All right, so Void Shatter is going to hit Emrakul, but now we get to see really what this deck is made of, because he's going to have a grip full of cards here, and Seth is now going to control his turn. With only 5 mana, let's see, well, Port Town's going to not matter here. So this is kind of interesting because you can see that with 5 mana available, Seth can cast like a Stasis Snare and then negate it, which is like, okay, he can cast a Stasis Snare and just get rid of Archangel Avacyn, which I'm assuming would stay that way. Yeah. But I don't know, is that devastating? It seems like not great for Cuneo, but I mean, look, Seth did just resolve a 13 mana spell. He gets something out of the deal. But if all he does is take a card out of his hand and take his threat off the battlefield, I feel like Andrew can recover from that.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the time when you see this card cast, it just wins the game on the spot. This is definitely not the case here. I guess, does he have 4 white sources now? No. So he can't Stasis Snare.
No, he's only got 3. Yeah, he played the land for him, but like, does he have a better play than just Stasis Snaring away Archangel Avacyn? Feels like leaving Archangel Avacyn on the battlefield is not a great idea, especially if Andrew has a negate in his hand that we can see, as well as a Void Shatter, because Andrew's going to get his turn after that. And if Seth's plan is like, well, I can use one of my removal spells to kill Archangel Avacyn, well, that's not going to work. Andrew's going to counter whatever that is and keep the damage flowing with Archangel Avacyn. So it feels like Seth probably just needs to Stasis Snare away Avacyn and say, all right, well, 2 for 1. No, he's not. He's going to leave Archangel Avacyn on the battlefield and just take 2 cards out of Andrew's hand. So he's going to Void Shatter his own Stasis Snare. And it's going to be tough, though, because Seth Manfield, was that a Void Shatter off the top?
Yeah. And that's because, I mean, maybe Seth was setting up for a second copy.
Totally. That is absolutely possible, because you have to figure now that Seth is trying to resolve something huge, because he wanted to get the unconditional counterspell out of his hand at the expense of leaving Archangel Avacyn on the battlefield with negate in hand for his opponent. So he has something. All right, there's a Traverse, and Andrew's going to fire off that negate. The assumption here, of course, is that Seth is going for another copy of Emrakul. If he has one, does he have more than one in his deck?
Let's take a look here.
Sometimes these decks just run one.
No, just one.
Okay, so he's going to go for a threat. Instead, he's going to play 2 copies of Grimflayer, but the remaining Stasis Snare is going to take down one of them. And, Andrew wins this race pretty cleanly. This is Seth going to 6.
Yeah.
Magic players, may I please have Lennon Philo to registration, please. Lennon Philo to registration.
Grimflayer is going to attack, but Blessed Alliance is going to gain Andrew 4 life and kill the Flayer. And, this has not worked out well for Seth. He likely is going to lose to this Archangel Avacyn here. He's only got one more turn left over.
And that's it?
Yeah, he tried to race. He tried to set up a situation where he could just put out more power, but that did not work. And Andrew Cuneo takes game 1 here, and he's got that smile on his face. You can see Seth is not smiling there.
No, not at all. And that was a big decision, though. I mean, that's a very difficult card to play with. I mean, if anybody can pilot that card, it's the champ. Here we see Seth Manfield currently ranked 3rd in the world.
Yeah. No, I mean, Seth is a beast.
Perhaps the best player in the room right now.
Which one? Cuneo or Seth?
I'd say Seth.
All right.
I mean,
I just clarifying.
I mean,
Cuneo's pretty good.
Cuneo's extremely good, and I think yesterday we definitely talked a lot about how good Cuneo is yesterday when we had all that extra time. Seth Manfield, though, a player that had been respected for a long time, had put up a lot of great Grand Prix results. For years, it seemed like he was always just hanging out in that top 16 range at Grand Prix. You'd go to Grand Prix almost every weekend. You'd see him there, and there was his name in the final standings, 15th, 12th, 13th. And then one day, he started just top 4ing all the Grand Prix. Then he started winning a bunch of Grand Prix. Then suddenly, he was qualified for the World Championship, and we got to watch him destroy that World Championship, if anybody remembers the year before this one. I guess so, last year.
Oh, yeah.
Especially the limited rounds in that.
So I've got
World
a correction, by
Championship,
the way, Jake.
Yeah.
Our friends in the chat have very kindly pointed out to me. So since it was Andrew's own Stasis Snare and casting it from his hand, he can't target his own creature from it, even though it was Seth who was doing it.
You're right.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
that
line
sense.
was completely unavailable to Seth, and that changes, everything.
That does change everything.
So appreciate the correction there,
Yeah,
chat.
thank you, guys.
I did forget. It's weird because when I see a player like, I'm going to put this on the stack, I think, well, then you should kill that guy's creature. But that's definitely not how it works. So appreciate the correction there. Yeah, good morning, chat.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
But it does make sense.
I also knew that was opponent, and somehow it didn't register because Seth was the one doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, but Seth knew, thank God, and didn't try to break the rules of Magic. And, but still a tough spot for him. And, I think going back to the discussion that we had at the beginning of that Emrakul turn, how good is Emrakul against Cuneo? Kind of not great, right?
Not very exciting.
It didn't seem that good there, and especially given the limited options that Seth actually had. I mean, he basically got to take 2 cards out of his hand, that's pretty good, but man, I think you're hoping for a bit more. When you save up all that delirium and finally cast your huge big finisher that you've been working towards, that card's supposed to kind of end the game, and it really didn't there.
Yeah. Perhaps in the future we'll see these green-black delirium decks gain access to a card like Distended Mindbender when it comes to post-boarded games, something like that. Because right now, it doesn't really seem like they can upgrade that well in those regards.
Let's take a look over here at Zachary Keeney versus Ari Lax. These are our other 2 undefeated players, Jake. We had 4 come in from overnight. 2 of them are in our main match, and then these are the other 2 here. Blue-White Flash, which is similar to what Cunio's playing in the sense that it's trying to do some similar things as far as like casting a lot of spells on your opponent's turn, but the game plan is much, much different. This is why we gave Andrew's deck the control moniker, because look, I mean, there's a Reflector Mage and a Smuggler's Copter, and Cunio's having neither of those in his deck. Yeah,
Cunio only really casts spells that either have flash or are instants.
Right, and so that is the huge difference. Even though, it is interesting because we did call it a control deck, but like there's no sweeper. He basically just replaced all of these sorcery speed things with counter spells, and has been able to find his way to 9-0 and up a game in round number 10.
It's pretty impressive when we get to watch these Cunio decks actually run through a field the way they're supposed to. Ari Lax playing Mardu Vehicles. This is, I don't know if you have an opportunity to play with this one since last weekend, but I like this deck a lot. If I was going to be playing an aggressive deck this weekend, I think this would be my choice.
Well, Ari agrees with you. Ari looks like he's slowly falling behind here. He does have, this is game 2, by the way, with Zachary up a game, but, he's got an Always Watching Out, which can certainly be pretty fantastic, but he needs to add more threats to the battlefield to make that great. He's just going to send in there with the Thraben Inspector. All right, first match is underway. Let's jump back over there.
Yeah, let's check it out.
This time, Seth Manfield's going to be on the play. He's got himself a Traversal Ulvenwald to kick things off. It looks like he's grabbed a Forest with it just to get that mana rolling. Maybe he'll have a Grimflayer here on turn 2. Let's find out.
Be pretty nice for him. I mean, especially getting underneath counter magic with a card like that it's just such a big difference in the way these games are going to play out.
It's so brutal, though, for him because it looks like he's going to lead off with Transgress just because Andrew has so many of these white removal spells. Though, as it turns out, Andrew's kept a relatively action-light hand, but with a pair of Anticipates, he should be able to find what he needs pretty quickly. Looks like a Summary Dismissal is the only legal target for the Transgress the Mind.
That is some terrifying art, by the way. Transgress the Mind.
Oh, it's horrific. I think that's like a Yeti. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
It's gross. Okay, now this is some business. Oh, but Andrew has a negate off the top of the library. Oh, man.
That's brutal.
Seth Manfield
brutal.
tried his darndest to set up a turn 3 Liliana without it getting countered, and Andrew just top decked the answer and calmly negates what would have likely been a major issue for him. Like,
oh, yeah.
If he drew a land there, his hand is anticipate, land.
And his opponent is going to untap with a Planeswalker.
With, on 4 loyalty and marching upwards. So, oh, man, that is savage. Manfield has to just be shaking his head.
But I mean, when you play as much counter magic as Cunio is playing, then
yeah, it does happen. It's just he had a 1-turn window.
Yeah,
like,
and it had to be a negate too. It couldn't even be anything else.
Okay, well, it's not going to slow Seth Manfield down. He plays a Pilgrim's Eye and then a Grimflayer. But the Grimflayer is actually going to earn a Void Shatter that Andrew had drawn as well. Tapland now passes the turn back to Seth. So Seth, not really able to get much going in the early game here. He tried. He really did, but Cunio able to counter his first 2 major threats. And now we see Seth going for a different game plan. He's going to activate a Hissing Quagmire and start attacking. And this is a plan that tends to work pretty well against counterspell heavy decks. These creature lands are a real issue for them. Good news for Cunio is that he does have answers. He's got Immolating Glare and Blessed Alliance that he can use to kill a Hissing Quagmire at some point.
Yeah, and Hizen Quagmire also applies the least pressure of
Correct.
the new man lance.
Yeah, he's at 16.
Regard. Yeah.
And he used up the majority of his last turn to do that. Now things get real scary for Seth. He's not going to activate that Hissing Quagmire this time because, once again, now Andrew's all loaded up with 5 cards in hand and 6 mana available. Well, Seth is just like, all right, I'm just going to run you out of counter spells here. So he's just going for it. I think this is going to earn a Torrential Gearhulk, though, from Andrew.
Yeah, and that's just disastrous for Seth. The pace of the game just turns around absolutely.
Yeah, that is what it's going to be. And he's going to flash back a negate. So Ob Nixilis, nope. And Seth already starting to see this one slip away. God, this matchup does not feel great for Manfield. I mean, he got a little unlucky there, but still. Andrew's kind of having his way with him here.
The counter magic density is just so high for Andrew here. I mean, Seth never had an opportunity to play a 2-drop on turn 2. And Seth is going quite a bit bigger with his green-black Delirium deck than the other versions we're seeing. So where a lot of these green-black Delirium decks, like the one that Eric Froelich played last weekend, might be able to get underneath Andrew Cuneo, especially when on the play, Seth's deck really can't do that. He's trying to out-control his opponents. And when you're playing against a deck with 11 counter spells and tons of card draw spells and anticipates, it's not easy to do that.
Here's a nice one from Seth. With Anticipate on the stack, he's going to fire off To the Slaughter, which does not have Delirium, but it doesn't really matter. He's just trying to get rid of the Gearhulk. But again, we mentioned this before, but this is where Andrew Cuneo has now switched gears and is just looking to protect his threat. So he counters the To the Slaughter, but Seth had a backup plan with a Murder, and that does resolve. So Gearhulk down, but Andrew has a lot more threats than that. He just wanted to try to keep that one up because he knew that he could start to close this game out, but he'll find another one.
Rob Castellan, please come to the main stage. Rob Castellan to the main stage.
And Pilgrim's Eye keeps pecking away in the air. And there's an Ishkana.
It's a big threat. Andrew has been sculpting his hand, though. This deck does play a lot of counter magic.
Yeah, he's actually going to Void Shatter it, though. Does Seth even have Delirium? No, right? Instant Planeswalker Sorcery. Still, it is a threat, and you mentioned it before. He does need to respect basically every threat that his opponent plays, and 3 power is 3 power, so Andrew's just going to counter it.
Yeah, he doesn't play any sweepers, Andrew.
Right.
So
he can't catch back up, right?
Like, yeah, he doesn't want to let people get multiple threats in play because then he just can't catch up. Mm-hmm. He really needs to be using cards like Blessed Alliance and Immolating Glare to get him back in the game at those points.
I'm curious to see this one because here's a Grimflayer, but Cuneo has a Torrential Gearhulk in hand. So he could deal with it. He chooses not to. He may try to just ambush the Grimflayer at some point. The other thing that we'll see from Cuneo is that he has a Glimmer of Genius in his graveyard, and he may just want to use that to find more answers rather than using just a counter spell. Yeah, so that
makes sense.
That's what he's going to do. Scries 1 to the top, 1 to the bottom, then draw 2. So he's got one thing that he wanted, and then an unknown card. He's built up 4 energy here as well, though I don't think he spends it much.
No, he's not very good at spending the energy.
No, I think it just sort of sits there.
The fact that it's there, though, that's comforting.
Very comforting.
Yeah.
Okay, and Andrew's just going to pass a turn back using that Torrential Gearhulk to basically keep the Grimflayer at bay.
Achilles or Brian Benz, please come to registration. Julie Achilles or Brian Benz, please come to the registration table.
Geez, it just feels like this matchup is horrid for Seth.
I do not envy being in Seth's seat here.
And the nice part about a deck like Andrew's is, I mean, there are definitely some holes in the metagame where, like, some decks are just really, really hard for you, like red-white tokens and black-red aggro. But once you get up into, like, the 9-0, 10-0 range, I feel like your head's above those clouds, you know?
And we'll see. If he is, then we may see Andrew Cuneo in the top 8 here.
Which I'm sure would be refreshing for him. He's had 4 9-0 day ones where he failed to convert to day 2, or failed to convert to top 8.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
It's not the happiest situation.
Cuneo is going to use a Spell Queller just to finally eat that pesky Pilgrim's Eye. That helps make Blessed Alliance a little bit better, and also just, he was taking 1 damage a turn. Okay, there's a Ruinous Path, which is going to be met with Negate. Keeping that Gear Hulk alive is really important now for Cuneo, as it's holding back 8 power at this point for Seth Manfield. Cuneo's going to start chipping away in the air with the Spell Queller. It's not blocking anything currently.
Only 7 more attacks with that Spell Queller and the game ends. Of course, Andrew probably going to close much quicker.
Yeah, if Seth can find a way to get rid of that Gear Hulk, he can make short work of Andrew here. Ooh, Tireless Tracker.
It's good at finding answers.
That's gonna demand an answer from Cuneo.
Oh, no,
But he doesn't
lands.
have it, so it's gonna resolve. Is this an Avacyn?
I think it's just a Westphal Abbey activation.
Oh, he's just gonna activate Abbey. Okay. Yeah, now the interesting thing that you mentioned there, no land for Seth Manfield. So the Tireless Tracker doesn't look super scary, but still, Andrew's going to have to be concerned about that.
It's not the type of thing you just want to leave in play.
Right.
Of course, Andrew can't really get it off the table unless it attacks.
Right. Which is pretty awkward for him, though, especially because, A, it's not planning on attacking anytime soon. Okay, well, there's a Stasis Snare, so... That will certainly get the job done. Andrew does play 3 of those in his main deck, so he does have some ways to get rid of those more passive threats. Got away cleanly with that one, too, man. Things have really been going well for Andrew. Seth is fighting the fight, but not even a single clue token for him off of that Tireless Tracker. Okay, here's one. Here's Liliana. There's a Spell Queller. Andrew wasted no time with that one. He does not want to let Seth start getting big board advantage with Liliana.
It also cuts the clock in half here.
For 8-12. There's 4 of it.
Yeah, the window closing faster and faster here. If Andrew has an Avacyn in his hand, then
Ooh, is this a
next turn it
Traverse?
could be over.
Oh, it's not a Traverse. It's a Vessel of Nascency. But Andrew's having none of it. He figures that Seth is out of gas and countering anything is good. This doesn't quite give him lethal, though, does it? Oh, it
Well, if
does,
he activates
actually.
the Abbey,
if he
yeah.
makes an Abbey, he can actually just attack with everything. Now, I'm assuming that there's a Hissing Quagmire available, though, for Seth Manfield still, which would give not quite lethal. It would still put Seth to 1. But it would force a chump block with one of the Grim Flayers.
But
Andrew
Hissing
may just
Quagmire
wait.
does throw it off. You're right.
Yeah, it does. So I wonder if Andrew could just go for
Ormondal?
Westvale Abbey. Yeah. Like, he gives him back a Liliana he can't use, a Vessel that doesn't realistically do anything, and then he takes out the other Spell Queller plus the 2 ground creatures, and then he hammers him for 9 in the air. I don't know. I don't think I would do it, But also, I can't think of a great reason why not to. Sounds kind of sweet. Well, this attack does put Seth in an awkward spot because he needs to activate his Quagmire and block individual threats with both or all three of his ground creatures, which means that one of them is going to, at the very least, trade for the Torrential Gearhulk, and you see that here.
It definitely could have worked out worse for Seth here.
I agree. He is going to 1, though, facing down 3 lethal threats.
Yeah. And a Westvale Abbey.
Right. So effectively 4. Pretty much any, like, if Andrew has a Void Shatter, it's just game. That is 8 power up on the battlefield there for Seth. And Seth is just going to extend the hand. He's had enough of it. Andrew Cuneo. And he says, I had an Immolating Glare left. Defeat Seth Manfield to improve to 10-0 now at the tournament with blue-white, I'll throw it in air quotes, control.
Looks pretty controlling to me.
I don't know. I mean, when you play Spell Queller on turn 3 and just start beating down with it, you know, that doesn't remind me of control deck. When you
see, I don't feel like he does that though. He plays Spell Queller on turn 3 when his opponent is attacking him with a 1/2. Like he'll, you know, gain some value there.
All right. We'll talk about that later. That is going to do it for round number 10 here from Providence.